Hello everybody, welcome back to the Vinyl Junkie Record Shop. My name is Mike and I hope everybody had a great weekend. It was a pretty cool weekend. If you were a NASCAR fan, got a good race at Loudon, New Hampshire. You know, we like other things here at the Vinyl Junkie Record Shop besides good music. We like sports. One of my favorite sports is NASCAR. And my favorite driver currently in NASCAR is the driver of the Stewart-Haas Racing number 10, Aric Almirola. You see him sporting his gear, and the reason I'm doing that is because he got his third career win yesterday and punched his ticket to the NASCAR playoffs. That's pretty cool if you're a NASCAR fan. In order to celebrate Aric's third career win, driving the 10 car, I thought I would do my top 10 list of third albums from thrash metal artists. We haven't featured thrash metal here at the record shop for quite a while, so this is going to be a fun video for me. Again, these are my takes. I'm not saying these are the top 10 best third releases in a discography from by all means. These are just the ones that are my personal favorites. There probably aren't going to be too many surprises in this list, but this should be a lot of fun. So what we're going to do is I'm going to pick 10. Aric's number 10. 10 of the third discography releases by Thrash Metal Bands to celebrate the 10's third career win. So here we go, and we're going to throw in 3 honorable mentions, just because 10's never enough, really. And I'm going to cheat just a little bit. As you see over my shoulder, you can see Dark Angel's Leave Scars. Really wanted to put it on the list. Didn't quite make the list, but I wanted to feature it kind of a little bit, so it's playing in the background and you can see it on the vinyl wall there. Fantastic third release from Dark Angel, Leave Scars. Okay, so honorable mention number 1. Let's get to it. This could have easily been on the list. It's probably on a lot of lists out there, but this is from 1989. This is Sepultura with Beneath the Remains. This is the remastered version released in 1997, I think, maybe. Anyway, I'm going to show you everything on CD today. It's just a lot easier to dig out to get the CDs out than dig out the vinyl. And plus, unfortunately, a lot of these albums were released at a time where vinyl collecting, at least back in my day, was kind of on the decline, and CDs were the major media, or the most common media that everyone picked up. Unfortunately, I don't have a lot of these classics on vinyl. Always on the hunt for them when I go out on digs. But anyway, Beneath the Remains. First couple of Sepultura albums were a little more raw, punkish oriented. This one, I think, was influenced an awful lot by what the Slayer had done in the last couple of years before this, and this was their album that would kind of cement their sound as more of a traditional thrash sounding band that would bring those South American, Brazilian musical influences and sounds into the fold. The Sepultura always sounded very unique. I think Arise is my favorite of the Sepultura albums, and then of course after Arise, the band would I think deliver the world's first nu metal album in Chaos AD, and would see them take their sound in a whole different direction. But Beneath the Remains, definitely a thrash classic. Tracks like the title track, Inner Self, Mass Hypnosis, just a great album from 1989, Sepultura's Beneath the Remains. Okay, we're gonna, this is a band, that kind of a polarizing band in the heavy music world. I've kind of grown up with this band since the inception of their career. I saw them very early in their career, played a stage in Fort Wayne, Indiana. I don't even remember who they opened for. Mushroom Head might have been the headliners, but this band opened the night, and when they hit the stage, I could tell that this was a band that was going to be successful and was going to make it in heavy music. And I'm talking about Lamb of God, and this is their breakthrough album from 2004, Ashes of the Wake. Front and back there. A lot of people either love or hate this band. I think that in the early 2000s, when thrash metal especially kind of needed a little bit of a revitalization, Lamb of God came out and was delivering the goods, and kind of I think helped reignite an enthusiasm for the genre. You had what was going on in Sweden with the whole new wave of Swedish death metal and thrash metal, but American metal bands, especially thrash metal bands, were kind of lagging behind just a little bit. And Lamb of God came out and just lit a fire under everybody. And this album was a definite progression in their sound, being a little more accessible. The first New American Gospel just had vocals from Randy Blythe that were just, they're indecipherable. And as they were spiteful and angry, but this kind of brought the songwriting and overall sound into a much more, I think, listenable direction. Classic songs, Laid to Rest, Hourglass, Now You Got Something to Die For, Omerta. This is just a fantastic album, top to finish, and I think it's Lamb of God's best album. And then the final honorable mention. This is the newest, and even though this is the newest that I've got on my list, it's still 10 years old. But this is, I think, one of the leading American thrash metal bands of today. And this is their third release with Worlds Torn Asunder. This is the Mighty Warbringer. There's the back of it there. Early comparisons to Exodus. The first couple albums had a very Exodus-y feel, but I think this was the album where they kind of settled into their own unique sound. And yeah, there were hints of their influences, and as there always will be, it's hard to be original in thrash, especially today. But the songwriting on this album was fantastic. Great songs like Living Weapon, Shattered Like Glass, Wake Up, Destroy, one of my favorite, if not my favorite, Warbringer songs. This just, Demonic Ecstasy, Behind the Veils of Night, Echoes from the Void. This is just a great modern day. I can't say modern day, it's 10 years old now, but a modern day thrash classic. Okay, now let's get into the top 10, and here we go. From 1990, an album that I think was criminally overrated and overlooked. Underrated and overlooked, from a band that has been underrated and overlooked in their career, although they're starting to really kind of cement themselves now as one of the great thrash bands that has survived all of these years. This is Flotsam and Jetsam's third album, When the Storm Comes Down, released in 1990. This will be their first major label debut on MCA Records. And this just has some really great songs on it, from the opener, The Master Sleeps, to Burn Device, Deviation, and my favorite track of the album, one of my favorite Flotsam and Jetsam songs, Suffer the Masses, just has a tremendous, massive, powerful lead riff on that song. And finally got to hear him play that song live. It sounded amazing. Really good production by Alex Perailis, who's well known in the thrash metal world. But this was an underrated album, a little more melodic, and it had the speed, but it had more of, like Flotsam's music always has, kind of more of a traditional metal flair to add to the speed element to give it a unique thrashing sound that wasn't totally overwhelming to the ears. Great album. All right, from 1987, this is going to be the only. I think this is the only European band that we're going to find in the list, but from the German Big Four, this is Creator with Terrible Certainty. Man, I remember hearing this for the first time. It was really brutal to my ears. I wasn't sure what to really think of it, but it had a nice sense of I don't say melodicism to it too, but there were enough hooks and more mid-paced riffage in this album to capture my attention and make this stay in my list of classics of all time, from Storming with Menace to Terrible Certainty, As the World Burns, Toxic Trace. Great tracks from probably the best of the German thrash bands, in my opinion, Creator. All right, back to the United States from 1989 with their third release. This was the Bay Area's Exodus, Fabulous Disaster. Very raw and speedy thrash metal album. I think maybe the sharpest and rawest of the Exodus releases. It started off with the last act of Defiance that just sped out of the gate after the spoken word intro into Fabulous Disaster, and then cheesy as some people might say it is, it's one of my favorite thrash metal songs of all time, the Toxic Waltz. I always liked the cover of Lowrider, a little curious choice, but that led into Cage in Hell, which I thought was another underrated classic thrash song. Then side 2 just completely rips, Like Father, Like Son, Corruption, Verbal Razors. Got a cover of AC/DC's Overdose, give or take that. But anyway, yeah, I thought this was a really great Exodus album, and their subsequent major label releases would add a little more melodicism to the mix, and because Exodus fans were kind of on the fence about that, but this album maintains that really sharp ferociousness that Exodus brought to the table. All right, coming in at this is number 7. Almost hesitated to put this in here just because a lot of people might argue that the sound on this band's third album, switched in a lot of ways and incorporated a lot of different newer sounds to make it not necessarily thrash. And I would categorize this album as maybe the least thrashy thrash album ever, and that is Death Angel's fantastic Act 3. Released in 1989 on Geffen Records. This was, I believe, their first major label release after being on Enigma. But after seeing the band put out 2 albums of, fairly play by the numbers, but, pretty standard thrash metal, this album really incorporated a lot of different soundscapes into it. You had tracks like Veil of Deception and Room with a View that were kind of slow and ballady, and then there's some funk in here, but a real injection of melodicism that made the songs a lot more interesting, I think. But they still maintain that mid-paced thrash guitar riff oriented kind of center on most of the tunes. But songs like Seemingly Endless Time, Stop, The Organization, Stagnant, Disturbing the Peace. This is just a great album. I played the crap out of this when this came out. Took me a little bit to get used to that new kind of sound, but man, they just knocked out a good one with their third release, Act 3. All right, moving on. This is number 6. This is from 1989. This album didn't really... I didn't give this album the props it deserved back in the day, and I probably haven't listened to this thing in its entirety in many years, but it's always had a few tracks on it that were some of my standouts throughout the day. And this album is just absolutely phenomenal. I'm talking about Nuclear Assault, Handle with Care. On their third release, this band channeled the East Coast sound that I think we first really kind of got hints of with SOD. Of course, you had Danny Lilker, who I think is one of the greatest thrash bass players of all time. He's got such a unique sound, and he's such a big influence on so many other players. A couple more that'll even be in this list coming up here. But John Connolly's vocal delivery was very unique. Nuclear Assault was a thrash band that I don't think really sounded like anybody else. And you just really had some great songs on this album. New Song, Critical Mass, Inherited Hell. Boy, go Google or read the lyrics to Inherited Hell and see if, back in 1989 the band wasn't talking about something that, here we are 31 years later, and it just goes to show you that you young folks today think that maybe the world's coming to an end and everything is crazy. 31 years ago, guys your age were all thinking the same thing. It's full circle. The world survives. It lives. It's what it does. But great, socio-political lyrics. And the band Emergency, the song Emergency, written by Glenn Evans, the drummer. even had some, dare I say, proggy elements to it. In fact, the songs that Glenn wrote, or that he wrote for this album, all kind of had a few elements of that kind of, they weren't just straightforward thrash. You had a little more of a funky feel. In fact, there's a funk song on here, Funky Noise. There's just enough variety injected into this album to make it very entertaining as well. And it very underrated. I'll listen to this a whole lot more frequently now after getting it out, listening to it for this video. But if you've not heard Nuclear Assault, man, check out Handle with Care. Definitely, I think they're their greatest album. All right, now we're into the top 5, and it's any one of these albums in the top 5 could easily switch around, and they could all be number 1 any given day, any given mood that I'm in. And not only are these 5 of the greatest third releases of a band's career, many of these albums could fit into a top 5, top 10 list of metal albums all time. So it just goes to show you that bands' third albums, the third album is an opportunity to really kind of show the chops that the bands put together throughout their recording careers. And the kind of after the third year, you kind of got some ideas that aren't get some fresh ideas without running out of those. So I think that the band's third releases are pretty critical to their success and longevity in their musical landscape. This band dropped this album in 1988, and this was just one of my favorite albums ever. This is Overkill, Under the Influence. It's a virtual greatest hits list. You go down the whole track listing: Shred, Never Say Never, Hello from the Gutter, Mad God World, Brain Fade, well, the riffs in Brain Fade, Drunken Wisdom. Oh man, talk about rolling over somebody with in a steamroller. Into the Line, Head First, and then Overkill 3. Just a fantastic album from top to finish. If there's a blueprint for making a fantastic thrash metal album, Overkill really hit it with Under the Influence. So that's at number 5. Number 4, hot on the heels of that, this went head to head with Overkill's follow-up album, fourth release a year later in '89. These two albums were head to head for my album of the year, or thrash metal album of the year. This one narrowly beat out the Overkill album. We're talking about Testament's third release, Practice What You Preach. Again, songwriting on this, a new level. You started to see shades of that with the New Order. The Legacy was a lot more raw, a lot more thrashy, speed-oriented, and then the riffs started to come, and this album was just chock full of great mid-pace thrash guitar riffs. The band really hit their stride with this. The title track, Practice What You Preach, Perilous Nation, Envy Life, Time Is Coming, Greenhouse Effect, just a few. The Ballad, one of the first thrash metal ballads, a great song. Nightmare, Coming Back to You. Again, could read like a greatest hits collection. Practice What You Preach was a band that was really hitting their stride, and it was hard pressed for them to capture, I think, on subsequent releases, especially Souls of Black. I thought kind of sounded a little samey, and there weren't a lot of new ideas on it. But this one kind of, I think Testament reached their peak in the '80s with this one, Practice What You Preach. Okay, at number 3, easily again could be one of the all-time greatest thrash metal albums ever. I think this band kind of had suffered somewhat of an identity crisis in their first few albums, really kind of throughout their whole career, because this band came out of the gate with kind of more of a just traditional metal sounding album. Then they injected some speed into it, and then some of their members went and formed a side project, which would really plant the seeds of a whole new kind of crossover-y kind of sound. And I meant to say when I was talking about Dan Lilker from Nuclear Assault, that Nuclear Assault album has really that you talk about a blueprint for today's modern day crossover bands. Power Trip, Enforced, other bands of that ilk. Their sound is much more rooted in Nuclear Assault than it is what I think traditional crossover. I think a crossover, DRI, Crumbsuckers, Cro-Mags, that kind of Excel, those kind of things. These modern bands that are being labeled as crossover sound so much more like Nuclear Assault, which I never thought as crossover. They had a little punky sound in their music, but they were more straight ahead thrash with those big mosh riffs. And those mosh riffs kind of really started in SOD, and long story short, that all carried over into what I think is one of the greatest metal albums ever. That was Anthrax, Among the Living, released in 1987. This saw the band put out a sound that was unique, I think, really to them at the time. Songs like Among the Living, Caught in a Mosh, I Am the Law, Evil Nick Confessin', Indians, One World. They took that more speed approach that they had when spreading the disease, which had more, I think, more of a new album kind of flair. It was like new album with more speed. But this album put that bounciness, that if you want to call it crossover, that kind of that guitar tone with that sound of those riffs, solidified in this album. And then, really going forward, the follow-up, State of Euphoria, even deviated more from that. So, Anthrax is a band that really kind of, their sound goes off in all kinds of different directions. And then, great metal band, but this, I think, was, as far as the thrash metal goes, this was definitely the highlight of their career, and one of the, by far, their best album and one of the finest metal albums ever. And now the top two, I mean, probably no there's no secret as to what these are. They could have been interchanged at either time. But for me, number two is the third album from Metallica, Master of Puppets. Everybody knows this album. It doesn't really need any introduction. Oddly enough, this is probably not my favorite Metallica album, but I think it is probably the best Metallica album, if that makes any sense. With Master of Puppets, the band created a sonic landscape that just introduced so many different structures and styles, and there's tempo changes, there's lyrical imagery, there's everything you could want with this album. That just really solidified this as one of the great metal albums of all time. Battery, Master of Puppets, Thing That Should Not Be, Slowed It Down, Welcome Home, Sanitarium. Few thrash bands can pull off songs like Welcome Home and make that sound extremely heavy. Disposable Heroes, my favorite track on the album. Again, I think not their thrashiest album, not their heaviest album, but probably their most sonically diverse and creative effort. Master of Puppets will always remain one of the greatest metal albums of all time. But my number one third release from a band has got to be from 1986, Slayer with Rain and Blood. Man, you talk about setting the bar for what thrash metal was going to be. This is the album that did it. Now, Show No Mercy was more of a speed metal album with again, I think had more traditional new album elements to it. They threw the speed in there. And then Hell Awaits was a, more raw, darker, kind of, I don't know. I'm guessing that Venom had, kind of an influence on how they would put that in their sound. But Hell Awaits was definitely a notch above when it came to adding aggression to the speed. And Hell Awaits sent a message on its own. But then when this thing came out of the gate, man, just from the opening scream of Angel of Death through the end of this thing, this is what, under 20, I think it's under 20 minutes, 22 minutes, 23 minutes, however long the album is. This thing just comes in, kicks your ass, and pisses off, and that's part of the charm of it. But Slayer just really set the bar with what aggressive thrash music was going to be. And not a whole lot of melody per se in these albums, but the dual guitar work that you got from Hanneman and King, was there was enough depth in that guitar sound to make it interesting and not just a pounding in your ears. Just a fantastic album. Enough speed changes, enough tempo changes in it to make it interesting. But it's just a full throttle thrash album. And the follow up to this, South of Heaven, would show that not only could you be extremely heavy and extremely dark by putting your foot on the accelerator, they'd slam on the brake with South of Heaven and show that you could still be mean and nasty and hard and heavy by slowing the tempo down a little bit. But this is a template for what all thrash metal would be to go forward. And the third album from Slayer, I think, stands today as the definitive thrash metal album of all time. So that's my top 10 list of the best third album releases from thrash metal bands. Let me know what you think in the comments. If you're new to my channel, please hit like, hit subscribe. Let your other musical friends know I've got this channel out here. I've got a core base of followers that I'm happy to have. But I'd like to see. I'd like to get a few more. I was excited to hit the 100 subscribers mark. So now I'm, trying to hit 200, and it's awful slow rolling. I've got to pick a video topic that the algorithm, YouTube algorithm thing will send out to reach a lot of people. But anyway, I thought this was kind of a little fun thing to do to celebrate again Aric Almirola's third career victory in the number 10 car. For all you NASCAR fans out there, I've got my gear here. It's got my autographed Aric hat there, kind of neat. Got some other cool stuff besides just the music in the music room. So, yeah, thanks for joining me today in the record shop. Let me know what your favorite third albums from bands are, if I missed any in there. Let's get the conversation going on that. And I appreciate you coming by. I look forward to you the next time. Thanks for joining me in the shop. Remember to spin them if you got them, and I'll catch you on the flip side.